Australia is said to be the lucky country. Today I want to look at why we're the lucky country and how that occurred, but also how a small economy that's very open to international investment in and out, is it all good, or is there certain risks we need to watch out for? I want to start with the fact that right now we've had 27 years of continuous growth in GDP, growth in our incomes. Now that has been possible largely because we've had such a good resource mining boom up until 2012, and we continue to sell lots of resources to our number one customer being China. We've also had a situation where historically we've benefited very much from our alliances with the Western powers, and I want to talk through that as well. We have a situation where millionaires, the most millionaires last year migrated to Australia. We had 12,000 migrate in comparison to the US, which had 10,000. People want to live here, and they want to live here because of the growth of the economy, because of the clean air, because of the good schooling system, the safety of the country, and because their assets are seen as being safe. The reputation of Australia having a strong rule of law, being a safe place to put your money with your own ownership and the legal reinforcement of that ownership is seen as a great place to invest. Now let's step back and have a look at how all this came about. If we look at back in the 1500s, about 1500 to about 1820, it was China who was the greatest empire at that time. China had ruled for thousands of years in a very successful way, and it caused them to become quite insular in the way they were thinking. Where the Western powers, mainly Great Britain or England, they had been building up and building innovation and science and really starting to think about new ideas, creating things like the steam engine, for example. Later came electricity and the telephone, and these were called the industrial revolutions. Medicine was found, life expectancy increased, and these great innovations really propelled what was the West and England up into a stronger situation. So what we had then was this closed off China, who then was quite surprised by an England that was imposing then trade upon them. And when China didn't want to open up to too much trade, England imposed their might. And in the Opium Wars, England trying to sell opium to China, the display of the power of innovation with their steam-powered ships that came in and sailed upriver behind the defences of the Chinese and that's when Hong Kong was taken by the English. It really propelled the English and the Western world into being the more powerful economies at that point. Now, as we know, we were part of the English or the British Empire, and so all these new technologies we were early adapters of, whether or not we knew it or not. It was involuntary adaptation of technology which really propelled us being a country of Great Britain. Then we went through to the First World War, and the First World War, Britain was and ourselves were hurt quite badly by such an aggressive war, and the debt levels rocketed up despite the fact that the Allies won the war. The Second World War came, and again greatly indebted Britain was despite winning the war, and that's when the US relative to Britain became a power, a rising power, and Australia really aided the US, helping the US send machinery here and gave us the knowledge, but we helped supply the US in their pursuit in World War II. And so therefore we created a very strong tie with the US, again allowing us to get capital and knowledge and innovation from the US technology. The Cold War had just begun afterwards with communism against capitalism, and again Australia fought in the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and we came through in that period of time, again strengthening our relationship. As a side note, Japan did really well through the Cold War because the US supported Japan to rebuild after World War II, and Japan really took to that very adaptive culture and were able to then shoot up to the second biggest economy in the world at that point, until they had a big asset bubble and a bust that was quite devastating, and a case that the West still is wary of what happened to the Japanese. But back to Australia, after the world wars and the Cold Wars, the US came over with a large amount of investment, bringing many companies here and really bringing a lot of capital into the country, knowledge and innovation. So that really built us up in terms of where we are, or gave us a very strong base for where we are today. Also, with such a strong immigration policy, a very multicultural country, we've managed to maintain relationships not just with the West, but we have a very strong partner in that of China in terms of trade. China is our number one customer. So through the 2008-9 recession financial crisis, Australia managed to get through quite well, namely because China maintained the purchase of our resources. We also had a government stimulus package, which has really increased the government debt of Australia, and we had interest rates fall. So we managed to get through unscathed in a sense because our income did not go backwards. We didn't have a recession. We didn't have 2 periods of negative growth. And we're pretty much, according to Austrade, broken the world record for the longest period of growth for a developed country. But all this doesn't just come without any side effects. There are side effects to being successful, and one of the side effects, because we now have got such strong infrastructure, capital markets, we've got such good knowledge and innovation historically, but for that we had to pay a price, and a lot of money is owed overseas for those who have invested here. We have $1.1 trillion about in foreign debt, which means that every year we're paying an interest amount or rental amount or dividend amount of about $62 billion each year. 62 billion goes out of our country for those payments. And the only way to reduce that is by either reducing the foreign debt or by finding other means for paying for our expenditure overseas, which means that we either export more or we can print and finance ourselves more. But what this means is, as the debt keeps growing, just like it would for yourself in a household, as the debt grows, it puts more pressure on our income. So we have more pressure on things like our interest rates, for example. Our interest rates have to come down to maintain our expenditure. Interest rates often do affect asset prices, like houses, and we want to maintain low interest rates to keep the house prices high, so we keep spending money. It's called the wealth effect. It also, according to the Bank of Australia, the Reserve Bank, they're trying to maintain employment. They're trying to keep employment high, so low unemployment, and stoke wage inflation. These are the things they're trying to do with interest rates, and there's pressure globally due to our global debts to do that. Exports, we want to export globally, and there's pressure on us to maintain our resources, our sale of resources, our sale of education overseas, our sale of tourism overseas. It's all quite pressured because our debt keeps rising. We have competition. We have pressure to maintain our competition overseas. So when the tax rates go down, let's say in the US, the corporate tax rate fell, so then we have pressure to reduce our corporate tax rate. We have got regulations on our minimum wage. We've got pressure around that. We've got pressure to be innovative. So we lose a sense of autonomy because the effect or the impact that our global partners, whether they're our investment partners or whether they are our customers, our trade partners, that affects us because of our levels of debt. We've also become a culture of debt. We've become comfortable with debt, and a large part of that is because our house prices from the 1980s to today have gone up a factor of 8.5 times. And the baby boomer generation saw this and then told their children, the generation X and Ys, you should buy houses because houses never go down. And so this ownership at any price came about, where people just bought houses, and it was compounded by the fact that between 2012 and 2017, house prices in Sydney and Melbourne went up 50% as well. But really, what's happening is the debt is getting bigger, becoming a bigger portion of our income. So house price to average income ratios are going up. If you think in 1998, they were around 3 times an average income, where today around 6 times. These are Reserve Bank figures, but if you look at the core logic figures, it's higher, 8.1 times in Melbourne, 9.1 times in Sydney. So as you see that a bigger portion of your income, the house prices are a lot higher relative to your income, puts more stress on you because you need a bigger mortgage. If you need a bigger mortgage, that means more of your income is going towards a mortgage and not to other things. For example, our savings rate is now very low. It's 2.5%, where historically from the 50s, it was more around the 9% mark. Now it's 2.5% because a lot of our money is going to the mortgage or to rental payments as well. So we've been very successful in the way we've been allied with the Western powers. We've maintained that ability to be innovative and get the knowledge. We've got a great economy that's lasted a long time, good relationship with selling resources to China, and that's done really well for us. But there have been side effects of that, notably the fact that we've had an easy time being able to take debt, borrow money, and that makes us earn more per hour and also reduce our productivity. We're producing less, we're working less hours, and we're getting paid more for that in comparison to the world. It's not that we're lazy, it's just in comparison to the world, they're working harder for less. And so that makes us less competitive for the global CEO who's thinking about, should I set up in Australia, or should I set up in the Philippines, or should I set up in another country? It makes us less competitive and also potentially less innovative, as where our lifestyle's going well, we're not in a situation where we have to be overly creative. So what we'll do is in the next video, we'll look at solutions for our economic situation. How do we either reduce our debt, or how do we become more competitive globally? How do we make ourselves stand out in the global community and maintain what we have, such a good lifestyle and income level?